All of this is wasted if we can't show impact or have an impact on others. All of us have a story to tell. It's about impact. It's about mentorship.
Check out our website for more exclusive content on www.masstartup.co.za.
About entrepreneurs coming together to say, I have a journey of my own. That journey is not perfect, but I want to see if there's things that I've learned that I can impart on others.
And this is one of those things that really annoys studio executives. Like, they can sink $500 million into a movie, cough, Avengers, cough. And then, someone's 10-minute YouTube video will get more watch time from the same audience. Oh, yeah. Something that someone shot in the camera, So there's another imbalance, which is that consumers and audiences, to them, how technically complicated something was, how much money was behind it, is not nearly as relevant as, is this engaging? Do I enjoy this? Will I spend time watching this? So creators have the opportunity, which is kind of insane if you think about it. You have the opportunity to produce more engaging content than the largest studios on the planet by virtue of the fact that you are closer to your audience than they are.
From the Lucha Podcast Network, this is the Mass Startup Podcast. The Mass Startup Podcast profiles the most talented creators, impactful entrepreneurs, and high-performing professionals with the purpose to drive insights, learnings, and tactics to help you build the things that you believe in. This podcast is sponsored by Sage Accounting. Sage gives entrepreneurs and small businesses the information, insights, and tools they need to succeed. Sign up for a 30-day trial to start using Sage Accounting in your business using the offer code SAGEMASH.
Is it Christmas yet? I've had enough of this year.
There's no way that you're feeling that way in May? The end of May? Almost the end of May?
I actually, dude, when I checked, it was still February, and we were thinking about the first half of the year as this long way away in time, and now suddenly it's a week from now, and we're halfway through the year.
I think it's actually the pace of this year has gone from 0 to 100, and then last year went really slow, and obviously, I think everything everyone was going through contributed to that. I'm just not sure what's contributing to this perception that this year is going so much faster.
I wish I knew. Last year obviously did feel a bit slower because, pandemic. But this year it's there's still pandemic, but we're adapting to it somehow, and it's we're figuring out ways to keep busy. There's only so much Netflix you can watch before it's man, I got to do something. So,
what would you say is one of those projects you got stuck into because the pandemic happened?
Well, it wasn't a side project. I sort of quit my job in 2018 to go freelance, and I've started building a company around that, and that keeps me incredibly busy. The pandemic, we actually ended up ramping up, not down, last year. So I don't need side projects. I've got plenty on my main project to keep me busy.
Is this Get Berry or Amberstone?
This is Amberstone. So I, the short version of my background, I worked in digital marketing for 10 years for a company that was headquartered here, got acquired by a global firm in 2011. I worked there through 2018. Finally sort of had enough of the agency life, and then did what most people do. They quit and they start their own agency. I don't even know how I ended up here. But that's Amberstone. That's my 9 to 5, as it were. Berry is one of several sort of side projects that I work on, just because I think they should exist.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I just saw creator economy. I went wild because I feel like that's been my obsession for the last few weeks. It's just around the creator economy as well as the future of work, and just how we all sort of evolve through this, looking at creators as being these sort of, just one person out there that's doing something, whether it's YouTube channels, whatever it is, versus everyone basically becoming a content creator, whether it's a blog, a podcast, a video thing, whatever it is, everyone's like embracing that reality of you become the commodity, and like the work that you do is part of that, but it's not necessarily all of it. And you are the business, not the business becoming something that you work on, but you actually being the business itself.
Yeah, no, it's a shift that South Africa is like a little bit overdue for, in the sense that like it's difficult to explain this. I think I've worked in South Africa, technically speaking, all my life. From 2008 onwards, my company was based in Cape Town that I worked for. But because we spent so much time servicing international clients, just around that, I sort of got absorbed into the way things work in the US and the UK. And then when I quit and I started looking at South Africa, it felt like I had stepped like 10 years back in time in the way that everything runs in South Africa. And especially the way that like creators, and I think the validity of the creator economy is perceived. Like, I think today still, if you have like a high school kid who like wants to grow up to become a YouTuber, he's probably being like rubbished by his parents and community. Like, that's not a real job. Meanwhile, as I sit here in one of the groups I'm in, there's a creative class in some California university somewhere. Part of the syllabus is starting a Twitch stream and actually getting to like 100 followers and learning that skill like at university. So the US is like way ahead on this stuff. And we're just starting to kind of see now that, it is totally valid to build a career around being a creator and creating content. So I'm actually pretty excited for what lies next, or what comes next, rather, in South Africa, because
I also think it's just like a lot of the people that are regarded as creators aren't yet. Like, it's people that got famous for something else. And it just happens that, they built a really big following on social media, and people call them creators, but they don't actually make anything. And because of that, the people that actually make stuff don't get as much attention, and like their work is not really pushing through. And like you're seeing this in podcasts. Obviously, I have like a bigger focus around podcasts, but you're seeing a lot of creators that really were coming into the space to add a lot of value, create really beautiful connections, build really good communities. Those people aren't getting as much attention as, say, someone that just goes off, you got a following from whatever it was, and then just pivoted to podcast, and those people are sort of the ones that are sort of getting the bag first. Don't you think that becomes like a barrier to some people, that like, hey, the people that are actually trying to work on this as a career versus the people that fall into it, those are the people that are actually winning instead of the people that are like super dedicated around it?
I think the people, so what you're describing is sort of like the creation versus distribution dilemma. And in South Africa, right, you had very centralized, very monopolized distribution. literally, we have the South African Broadcasting Corporation. We have a company whose only job is broadcasting. Yeah, exactly. And so, you have that, and then it started becoming podcasting. People broke away, built their own platforms. But I think that is an advantage in a very narrow sense because it fades, right? For me, like the canonical example is the YouTuber, Felix Schellberg, PewDiePie. I don't know if you've heard of him or know him.
Oh, no, I have.
Yeah, it's no longer true now. I think some other Indian creator overtook him, but for many years, he was the #1 creator on YouTube. He pulled larger audience numbers than USA Today, America's largest newspaper. His only output was producing 1 video per day, every day for like 8 years. And for him to do that, he's able to produce relatable content to an audience that wants to see it. He beat the distribution channel of America's largest news organizations, which is kind of insane, but also illustrates that, yes, you might have the advantage now in terms of distribution where it's shaped, like a few people have most of it and all these new creators are coming up. But the people who rely on others for their distribution, they can't sustain that growth. They don't know how to go out there and build an audience because the audience was handed to them, right? They got a slot on a radio show. They got onto TV. It wasn't their job to build the audience. So I think in the long run, creators have a better chance of sustaining it because we know what it's like to have to build an audience from scratch.
Yeah. Actually, please go into what Berry actually is. By the way, the podcast has started at this point. I think we didn't even chat.
We're chatting now. That's the whole thing. Okay, so I think let me preface this by explaining, I guess, the rationale behind this. I kind of grew up on the internet, and I think I should start there because there's a clear generational gap between people who see the internet as a commodity and people who see the internet as a way of life. And I'm the latter. I see the internet as the foundation for modern community, much more than just shame. Sorry, I'm always reminded, lovely guy, Charles, very old friend of mine, he retired from an accounting firm a couple of years ago. He thinks of the internet as the USB dongle that you plug into a computer. So he literally showed up to my dad's house one day and asked if he could borrow the internet. And we literally were like, what? And he's like, no, the internet, the little stick. What? Oh, the dongle. Yes. So you wanted to check his email, right? So you asked him. And it's like, that's 2 generations ago. And I think we are in the generation where the internet is like our default for establishing community, probably in a more real way than the real world, especially if you're on social media. You're kind of used to this. And with that, with those connections comes the idea that you're building societies and cultures on the internet. And that's where I grew up, online communities. And I watched around the world, sort of the US, UK, Singapore, China, I saw these communities turn into economies. People started buying and selling things from each other, completely peer-to-peer, no central distribution, no nothing. And so when I look at the creator economy, I see it as a natural consequence of the fact that we're all online every day. Eventually, we're going to make and sell stuff to each other. And so when I quit my job in 2018, I set out to build a company that did, what I'm good at. But I've always had it in the back of my head that I want to put more effort into building whatever it is that helps South Africa's creator economy get going. And that's what we've been doing for the last couple of weeks, is that we've discovered a whole bunch of creators. We've reached out. We're having meetings and conversations. We're trying to assess pain points. What is it that's preventing you from reaching the next level, getting the audience, getting the income, building up to the point where you want to be, so that we can look at, what's the best thing to launch first to actually help local creators. And there's like a list of things that we're looking at. But at the moment, that's what Berry is. We're sort of in discovery mode. We're trying to figure out what are the top 2-3 pain points that we can help local creators address. And then out of that will come some products.
I think the easiest one that sort of most people sort of go to will be monetization, right? Everyone thinks that they figured out distribution. Everyone thinks that they figured out how to make the content or how much they should be making of it. But everyone thinks that it's very, very hard in South Africa to monetize that content and earn a living from creative work. Do you think that it's that easy, or does it go beyond that? Because I do think it goes way beyond just I can't find a way to make money from this. I think there's a lot more work that needs to go into creators understanding that distribution is super important, and you don't have to build your own app in order to earn that distribution. There's all these platforms that are trying to build all these tools into to enable as many creators to monetize or distribute whatever it is. But do you think it's as simple that it's just oh no, monetization is actually the problem? Do you think there's a lot more to it?
I think there is, and our first handful of conversations have borne that out. I mean, the main impression we're getting so far is that, it's we have these social networks. We have Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and the first thing, and I think we see this on Twitter every other day. Twitter is moderated by people that aren't based in South Africa, and that's sometimes obvious in the way that they apply their policies. But we're building our networks on platforms owned by large foreign companies that they wouldn't really miss us if we went away. And I think there's that, which also means that a lot of the tools and the information is built around reaching audiences that are that connected. So when it comes to building distribution and building networks, there's already, in my opinion, a little bit of a mismatch between what we need locally and what's actually available. But more than that, the predominant conversations we've had are just people who want bigger audiences. They just, they've heard about, posting stuff, posting automatically to social networks. They've heard about these things, but, they're making, music, or in one case, digital art. They just want to get more people to see it. How do they do that? And that's actually the first question we get. Monetization, I think personally, should be a consequence, not a goal. Like, you should get to the point where people are willing to pay you because you're creating and sustaining value, as opposed to just focusing on, how do I turn these people into money? And that's kind of, if looking at the way that think about monetization in, especially in the US, it seems like it gets as far as, if you have a big audience, you can slap a price tag on that, and that's your monetization strategy. It's like, no, there's more to it than that. Especially when you've got people that want to support others just because they like what they're doing. Yeah. It's not as transactional. It's much more like, you're doing a cool thing and I want to be part of it. And that's why I'm, pledging or donating money to you or whatever.
Yeah. And like, you think of a platform like Patreon, where it's really based off of just that, right? Like, it's, hey, you doing something really cool and I want to help sustain that thing. I just want to make sure that this still exists.
Yeah, and to me, that's a lot closer to the ideal way to monetize, because, not only is it, in a sense, expectation free, like you're not making a product to sell, you're just making stuff. There's also the fact that there's this accountability loop that forms where, if your audience, your fans, are in effect sustaining your lifestyle, that motivates you like nothing else to keep creating the stuff that got you there. Once you're producing, whether it's a podcast or, a webcast series, or you're writing novels or whatever it is you're doing, if you're doing it for the people that derive the value, some percentage of them will pay you to do that. And it becomes a self-reinforcing loop. It also protects you. I mean, I think protection is the right word. It protects you from being acquired by large media companies. It's one of my, Disney and copyright law are one of my biggest bugbears when it comes to, how the creator economy works, because there's a certain point, if you produce enough unique IP or you start straying into different territories, Disney can make your life hell. I don't think enough people know this. And so doing stuff for a community and making that sustaining, to me, seems like the healthier option than trying to, get your stuff syndicated by a major platform, or, get a hero designed and sold to Marvel. That doesn't seem to me like the sustainable way to build it.
Yeah, and like, what do you think of like South Africa's current state of the sort of very early versions of what the creator economy could be, right? So you're seeing a lot of people make podcasts, make YouTube channels, build followings on social media, and basically the low-hanging fruit is brands will come to you and they'll offer you a certain amount, and then you'll post about them. What do you think of that very transactional, very, there's no deep investment there from anyone to actually create something original or meaningful? It's really just like, hey, slap our logo on there and then we'll call it, a campaign. What do you think of these sort of early versions of what the creator economy could be?
Yeah.
And how we've actually sort of implemented it as well?
I think, so I should probably contextualize this. There's a website, it's still live, where we were able to, by hand, correlate all the Twitter users in South Africa. This was like the early 2010s. Me and a digital marketer ended up building a wiki page where we went and manually found all the South Africans we could. So I've been on Twitter since we were less than 300 people nationally. And obviously I've seen the network evolve over that time. Current campaigns, in my view, are just not sophisticated enough. Like, you've got, these, like you said, what's the phrase, DM for promo, like the absolute basic of, I have an audience, I can sell stuff to them. And then you've got the brands working with influencers, and that's cool, but it's not as sophisticated as having long-term arrangements, having brand ambassadors, having advanced analytics on what audiences are actually doing behavior-wise, tailoring stuff to that. To me, it just seems like there's a gap between what we're doing now and what we could be doing if we sort of knew more and had better tools for reaching our audiences. So I also don't think that that stuff's ever going to go away. You're always going to have the very basic models. And then as we learn new things and figure out how to run more effective campaigns, they just get more and more sophisticated.
That's true. And like you've seen sort of early versions of like platforms that can help creators or people that have a significant audience be able to monetize that audience. So say something like Webfluential, which, you know, I tried out very early on and I thought this is not what I think the future is. You know, like very early on I was like, there's something about this that doesn't seem right. And that for me was like, one, you know, it's making people bet against themselves, which is like you might have a significant audience that's deeply engaged and someone else might have a significant audience but has no engagement at all. And both of you are going to take the same rate. And you look at that as just being like you are the one that's actually betting against yourself in that situation more than the platform actually, you know, empowering you in any way. And the way I think of the creator economy is like the control. I always thought that the power balance was broken in South Africa, and that the brands had a whole lot more power or influence than the creators do. And because of that very significant power imbalance, that's why things are the way they are. And the more creators, you know, built their own platforms, created on more platforms, distributed a lot more content, really created at scale, that would change that sort of dynamic. And suddenly you'd have a situation where the creators were the ones in control of where the actual, you know, whether it's the monetization or like the really, you know, giving value to their audiences back rather than taking it through these sort of brand collaborations.
Yeah, that power imbalance is definitely real, and it feels much more tangible here than it does anywhere else. You know, in the sense that we do have this hyper-concentrated economy in South Africa, actually. I mean, if you looked at the list of the JSE top 40 companies, that hasn't really moved in the last 20 years. You know, there hasn't been like a new Microsoft coming along or like a big change to like the way our economy functions. So you do have that imbalance, and, you know, to get around that, you do need a much more sort of participatory economy, if I can use that word, one where, you know, creators aren't building audiences just to sell them ads, which is like the old way of thinking, but it's much more about building relationships and value and discovering new things out of that. You know, I've seen also a Webfluential, and there's another one that is very popular in Europe, whose name I can't recall now. But you're right about the fact it doesn't matter what quality you have. You know, people still play the old school numbers game, you know, that comes from like the TV and radio era where circulation equals revenue. That's absolutely not what you can do nowadays. And I think the only way that changes is if, you know, creators are building meaningful relationships with their audiences and offering tangible value. Because the interesting thing is, it doesn't matter to a consumer. It doesn't matter how much you spent on your content. And this is one of those like things that really annoys studio executives. Like they can sink $500 million into a movie, you know, cough, Avengers, cough. And then, you know, someone's 10-minute YouTube video will get more watch time from the same audience. Oh, yeah. Something that someone shot on a camera, you know. So there's another imbalance, which is that consumers and audiences, to them, how technically complicated something was, how much money was behind it, is not nearly as relevant as, is this engaging? Do I enjoy this? Will I spend time watching this? So creators have the opportunity, I mean, which is kind of insane if you think about it. You have the opportunity to produce more engaging content than the largest studios on the planet by virtue of the fact that you are closer to your audience than they are.
Yeah, that is that's such a powerful way to think about this, rather than just going, oh no, you know, I have an audience, here's a brand, let's put something on here and then just push it out. It's like creating way more meaningful and value for the people that listen, the people that watch, the people that read, right? Like, I think of, you know, one of the other side projects you sort of involved in, which is Banker X, which I think is like one of the most important investment and financial platforms in the country. How do you rationalize the fact that you guys have gotten this big, this quick, and have probably some of the most you guys are influential in the way in which you guys can drive people to do certain things. How do you rationalize the growth and existence of the actual platform?
Well, that Kashik. Actually, no, look, what this is actually really simple. There is a tremendous knowledge gap between, the sort of what we term the retail investor, or just the sort of the basic man on the street, and, that, people that work in the financial industry actually have.
Yeah.
And Kashik and I are sort of aligned on the point that we think that gap is ridiculous and we think it needs to be addressed. So I think a huge portion of our growth comes down to the fact that people want to know how to make more money, how to become wealthy, how to do all these things for various reasons, all of them valid, but you're not going to get that information, very easily. And so we're just like, okay, we're going to build a platform and make the stuff available for free. Because neither of us, myself nor Kashik, need this to be like a, this thing
Financially
that's
viable or anything like that.
In a sense, yeah. Like we started it just under a year ago, and we do eventually intend on monetizing it. But every step of the way, it has to be over and above what we're already giving away for free, which is much more than you're going to get from like a paid course on how something works. Like we're not here to extract value from anything. We're just here to make it sustaining. We don't need this to be like eventually sold out to a large media group or something. This is just a project where there's too many people falling for too many ridiculous scams in South Africa for us to like honestly say that things are okay. There'll be more details actually. We're also this week starting up a BankerX podcast, or at least we're talking about it, because I think it's just the next logical step. We were doing the Whiskey Thursday spaces already, yeah. And one of them will tell the origin story of where BankerX comes from in great detail. But one of the trigger events for us was we made up a fake Twitter account. We basically created a fake investment company called the Charlatan Group. Now, we named it the Charlatan Group.
I remember
right?
this.
And it's like, and we were like, this is obviously fake. And so we posted stuff which is obviously fake and over the top and completely ridiculous. People were DMing us asking how to invest completely sincerely. And we were just like, no, you got to be kidding. And that's actually when my eyes were opened up. Like now suddenly I understand why every couple months there's like WhatsApp Stockfell scams, there's crypto scams. People are kind of just handing over money and being taken for a complete ride. And it's like, oh, the reason this happens is that so many people can't tell a scam and the legitimate investment apart. And it's like, okay, well, there's something to be done here. And that's kind of like one of the trigger points for why we ended up building BankerX.
Yeah, and I think of it like, so I've been thinking about and talking about this formula, loosely like named as a formula, where it's like community, content, commerce, where you build a community through content, and then you monetize it however you choose later on. You guys have already built like a phenomenal community. Like, I don't know how big that Telegram group is now. Is it Telegram? Wait, am I right? Am I wrong?
Yeah, so there is a Telegram group. There's 3,000 engaged people, 13,000 subscribed people. There's a newsletter, and there's the 2 Twitter accounts.
Insane. And I saw the website also underwent like a refresh, rebrand, I don't know what, redesign, where the content is like so much, presented really well, where you really want to engage with it really meaningfully. How deeply do you guys think about the content that you're putting out, but also how important is the community to you guys as well?
So we're doing this for the community. Like this is a thing where, my background is mostly sort of technology and systems and some finance, and Kashik's background is deep finance, as in he works in investment banking. And between us, we're like, the reason we're doing this is we just want to hand out as much value as we can to as many people as we can. So the content we put out is in line with that. There's a team of fantastic content creators that are all sort of on board to, each one covers a specific area to publish, about investments, personal finance, lifestyle stuff. There's all sorts of specializations there. And the content we put out it's meant to be engaging and actionable because, we're not... BankerX is not like a lead generation channel for a company. We're not going to put out short pieces to try to get you to sign up for something. We were just like, no, we're going to give you the full article up front because that's what you need. You need to know how these things work. For us to put paywalls and barriers up, that's just not going to help us add value. So that's how we think about the content, is that every time, and this is actually the way I see it, every time I see somebody falling for a scam, it just motivates me that much harder to work on BankerX because you don't need to be making those mistakes. And I think, there's obviously, there's more stuff coming this year. The community response has been insane. There's a real need and a real desire for actually knowing this stuff. And it's not really being taught anywhere else. So to us, it kind of feels it's almost like a social responsibility in a sense. We want South Africans on average to be more financially literate, want to be wealthier, have access to the same opportunities that their peers have in other countries.
Yeah. When you think about the difference between, say, an individual creator trying to build their own following and just distribute content, whether it's financial, entrepreneurship, beauty, whatever it is, versus building a platform in order to distribute that information or that content, what do you think are the key differences between those two things? And also, what do you think is easier or better for creators to be focused on?
There's actually there's two different sets of skills involved. You can be excellent at your field of creation, whatever you're doing, music, writing, art, games, whatever. But building platforms is a skill in and of itself. Knowing how to engage, how to reach out to people, how to push your message, how to cultivate loyalty, how to cultivate a following. It's kind of slightly like a marketing / community building skill that takes a certain kind of person, a certain kind of effort. So to me, that's sort of the distinction. And I also think that's possibly the problem in the sense that we have a lot of really, really good creators in South Africa. We have a lot of good music. I've seen comics that are on par with anything coming out of the States. I've seen the potential here, but unless if you have access to a distribution network, you're not going to be able to make much progress in your career. And learning how to build those networks is like a career in and of itself, which is why I'm increasingly of the opinion that, there are individual creators who can do both, and they are able to, create the products and the content and build a community and drive the whole thing. But I think there are fewer of them than there are good creators that would be able to achieve amazing things if they were partnered with good distributors, people that wanted to walk that journey with them and were able to bring the skills of platform building and audience building. I frankly think collaborations are going to take us much further.
Yeah. And, just to sort of end things off, because I want to try and keep this shorter, is what do you think is one thing that, or, 1 to 3 things that every creator in South Africa should be focused on and really double down on right now?
Good question. Okay, step 1. Actually, this is not a 3-step program. No. So, okay, look, point 1, and I think maybe this isn't said explicitly, and maybe it's just me. I mean, it's entirely possible that I'm the only person in the country that thinks like this. I'm willing to accept that. But I think there's this implicit assumption that because you're not in like the UK or the US, you're not working in one of these states or for one of these companies, that the level of work you're capable of is somehow hamstrung by the fact that you're in South Africa. That is nonsense. Right now, you've got access, if you're online from a 3G connection in Alexandra Township, you're on the same network that Jeff Bezos used to build $1 trillion company. Like, come on. You are not limited by your geography. If there's any kind of idea or any kind of notion that sort of tells you that you can't be as good as your heroes in the States because of that, that's nonsense. Step two is that at the bare minimum, you need to be able to build and sustain relationships with other people. I've seen a lot of good creators who independently produce absolute magic, but that's all that they focus on, and they wish they could go full time and they wish they could build this up, but they seem to miss the thing that it's other people that are going to help you do that. So learn to put yourself out there a little bit. I mean, you don't have to pretend, you don't have to oversell. Like, I'm actually a huge fan of just honestly, like right now, this is the thing that I'm going through, and putting it online. There's a lot of empathy to be found out there. If you know who to not follow on social media, there's actually like a lot of good stuff and a lot of good connections you can make.
That's true.
And I think, between those two, the fact that you have access to the same playing field as the rest of the world, put yourself out there a little bit more, then it's just, I think it's often said that, there's a lot of, there's always like a ton of resources and things that you can access online, like an overwhelming amount of it. But I think that the better approach is to ask questions of people that have done the thing you're trying to do. Our experience with the Bankrex community especially has been that people are willing to help. And there's this, because I know like a lot of times it's very easy to say, oh, you want to learn how to draw? Sure, there's like 15 drawing courses and 300 hours of content on YouTube. But if your question is, how do I draw hands better? You're going to get more value by asking somebody who does that and just reaching out and say, hey, I saw you did this cool thing. Would you mind showing me how, or can you help me learn? Because that's the one thing that I've seen, is that people in South Africa are willing to help each other grow. But you have to actually reach out and ask for that help first. I would say those are the top three things, because everything else, the technical skills, what you're doing, the ideas you have, you're going to do that anyway. But now you have to learn how to do it in an environment that's, here, that's meant to support you, and, learning how to collaborate, I think, more than just creating individually.
Yeah, thank you so much, man. Like, by the way, I had no idea what direction this podcast was going to go in. I just wanted to have a conversation with you. And then it ended up being about the thing that I really care about the most right now, which is the creator economy, and like how to build the future and what the future of work will be. And yeah, I really appreciate the conversation.
No, likewise. Thanks for having me on.
Cool. Cheers. To access previous episodes of this podcast, but also gain access to other shows on our network, please visit lucha.com.